Good day to our thesis advisor, Professor Rome Sherif Montoya, to the panelists, Professor Milka de la Fuente and Professor Jerome Sison, and also to the chairperson, Professor Macrina Vicente Mutuk. I am Sophia Gabuat and I would like to greet you all a pleasant day. We will be presenting our study entitled Price Elasticity and Meat Consumption Patterns in Pasig City during the COVID-19 quarantine regime, together with my groupmates, Ms. Stephanie Bianca Vizca and Mr. Renal Habak. For the introduction of the study, here's Ms. Stephanie Bianca Vizca.
Thank you, Ms. Gabuat. I am Bianca Stephanie M. Vizca for introduction of the study. Our topic mainly focuses with a study about price elasticity and meat consumption patterns in Pasig City during the COVID-19 quarantine regime. Meat and poultry consumption is becoming more important in the Filipino diet. The love of meat products from local consumers saw a huge rise in meat consumption patterns specifically for pork production. Meat consumption is related to living standards, diet, livestock production, and consumer prices, as well as macroeconomic uncertainty and shocks to GDP. When COVID-19 arose, many places were put under community quarantine that resulted in limited movement of the public, temporary disclosure of non-essential businesses, and a lot of implemented checkpoints which affect the necessary trade, especially the delivery of goods in the market. The impact of COVID-19 on meat prices and consumption affects both local and international trade, definitely in those countries relying heavily on food imports and exports. And now, here is Mr. Renal Habak to present the statement of the problem of the study.
I am Renel Habak, and let's now proceed to the statement of the problem. Meat, which remains one of the most consumed commodities worldwide, has long occupied a special place in the food intake of consumers, which impacted the eating habits and patterns of most people. In this study, the researchers aim to know the price elasticity and the meat consumption patterns of the residents of Pasig City before and during COVID-19. It provides in-depth study within the three particular kinds of meat, which are the pork, beef, and chicken. Specifically, this study aimed to address the following questions, which are: number 1, what is the demographic profile of the respondents according to gender, age, marital status, employment status, monthly income, and seller or buyer? Number 2, how often do consumers consume meats per month before and during COVID-19? Number 3, what are the prices per kilo of meats before and during COVID-19? Number 4, is there an increase in prices and decrease in demand of meats in the market during the COVID-19? Number 5, what are the levels that influence the sensitivity of customers' behavior on buying meat before and during COVID-19 according to price, income, availability of substitute, safety protocols? Number 6, what are the reasons for buying meat before and during COVID-19 quarantine? The created problems want to discover if there is no significant difference in the meat consumption patterns in Pasig City before and during COVID-19 quarantine. Also, if there is no significant relationship between the price elasticity and the meat consumption pattern in Pasig City before COVID-19 quarantine as well as during COVID-19 quarantine. Now, here's Ms. Vizca to present the conceptual framework.
And now, let's move on to the conceptual framework. It consists of relevant variables of the study and identify how they might relate to each other. In our study, it consists of three pieces, which are input, process, and output. Input, it includes the general profile of the respondents in terms of their gender, age, marital status, employment status, monthly income, and if it is seller or buyer, and the rest of the statement of the problem that is indicated in this study. Process indicates the methodology used to meet the objectives of the descriptive study through survey questionnaire, analysis of data, and statistical treatment. This is where the researchers choose 150 respondents from one city in Metro Manila, and the researchers prepare and distribute the questionnaire as the research instrument. Output, first is to determine the prices and monthly consumption of customer on meat before and during COVID-19. Second, identify whether there is a significant difference between the consumption of meat products and the price elasticity of meat products before and during the economic recession such as COVID-19 quarantine. And last, conclusion for the subject matter of this study.
Let's proceed to the statistical treatment of data that the researcher used. First is the frequency and percentage. We use frequency to organize and summarize the survey data in a tabular format, interpret the data, and detect outliers in the survey data set, while percentage is used to compare one quantity against another with the second quantity rebased to 100. Next is the mean and weighted mean. The mean is also known as the average. The mean can be used to get an overall idea or picture of the data set. Mean is best used for a data set with the numbers that are close together. A weighted average, or also called weighted mean or scaled average, is used when we consider some data values to be more important than the other values, so we want them to contribute more to the final average. Mean and weighted mean is also used for Spearman rank order correlation in the interpretation of statement of the problem question number 8. While standard deviation is the number used to tell how measurement for a group are spread out from the average. A low standard deviation means that the most of the numbers are close to the average, while a high standard deviation means that the numbers are more spread out. Another statistical treatment is a paired sample t-test. A paired t-test is used to compare two population means where you have two samples in which observation in one sample can be paired with observation in the other sample, which the statistical treatment uses to interpret the statement of the problem question number 7, which indicates the before and after observation on the same subject. Lastly is the Spearman rank order correlation, which is a statistical measure of the strength of a relationship between two variables. We use Spearman instead of Pearson R or Pearson's product moment correlation because even if the variables are scaled, they are ordinal in nature. Spearman is more appropriate for ordinal data than the Pearson.
Now let's proceed to the summary of finding. According to demographic of respondents, which out of 150 responses, most of the respondents are female, majority is 21 to 25 years old, all most of the respondents are single, majority are studying, which is 50%, while only 25.30% are employed, and 3 respondents are unemployed. Majority of the respondents earn less than 10,000 pesos a month, and 120 responds as a buyer, and only 30 responds as a seller due to limited source of respondent because of COVID-19 quarantine protocol. Based on the monthly meat consumption in Pasig City, majority of the respondents decreases their consumption of meat in terms of beef, pork, and chicken during the COVID-19 quarantine compared to what they normally consume before the start of COVID-19 quarantine, which is impacted by the changes of prices, which as we can see in the findings that the prices of meat such as beef, pork, and chicken, majority of the respondents said that it increases during the COVID-19 quarantine, which shows that the pandemic and the quarantine protocols greatly affects the prices of the said meat.
Continue the findings. Based on the findings, majority said that the prices increase and 78 respondents concurred that it increases by 30%, while most of the respondents said that the demand of meat during pandemic decreases, which 116 respondents said that it decreases by 10%. Levels that influence the sensitivity of customers' behavior on buying meat before and during COVID-19 quarantine in terms of price, income, availability of substitutes, and safety protocols are all interpreted as strongly agree, which means that this factor influenced the customers in buying the meat both before and during the COVID-19 quarantine period.
Another summary for reasons of buying meat before and during COVID-19 quarantine. Before COVID-19 quarantine period, respondents strongly agree that they buy meat if it is necessary, if it is something they want, if it is affordable, safe, and available. During COVID-19 quarantine period, the respondents strongly agree that they buy meat if it is necessary, if it is something they want, if it is affordable, safe, and available. Is there a significant difference in the meat consumption patterns in Pasig City before and during COVID-19 quarantine? Meat consumption patterns of Pasig City residents before and during COVID-19 quarantine period significantly differ in terms of if respondents want to buy meat, while if meat is necessary, affordable, safe, and available, do not significantly differ before and after COVID-19 quarantine period. Is there a significant relationship in the price elasticity and meat consumption patterns in Pasig City before and during COVID-19 quarantine? For price elasticity and the meat consumption patterns of respondents before COVID-19 quarantine, results reveal that there are no significant relationship in the increase of meat prices and the meat consumption patterns of respondents. While for price elasticity and the meat consumption patterns of respondents during COVID-19 quarantine, increase in prices was found to have a significant and positive but weak correlation with respondents' meat consumption patterns during COVID-19 quarantine, which means that as meat prices increase, sensitivity of respondents in buying and consuming meats also increases and vice versa.
Now let's proceed to the summary of finding. According to demographic of respondents, which out of 150 responses, most of the respondents are female, majority is 21 to 25 years old, all most of the respondents are single, majority are studying, which is 50%, while only 25.30% are employed, and 3 respondents are unemployed. Majority of the respondents earn less than 10,000 pesos a month, and 120 responds as a buyer, and only 30 responds as a seller due to limited source of respondent because of COVID-19 quarantine protocol. Based on the monthly meat consumption in Pasig City, majority of the respondents decreases their consumption of meat in terms of beef, pork, and chicken during the COVID-19 quarantine compared to what they normally consume before the start of COVID-19 quarantine, which is impacted by the changes of prices, which as we can see in the findings that the prices of meat such as beef, pork, and chicken, majority of the respondents said that it increases during the COVID-19 quarantine, which shows that the pandemic and the quarantine protocols greatly affects the prices of the said meat.
Based on the findings of the study, the following basis for recommendation was drawn. For Department of Agriculture and Department of Trade and Industry for proper imposition of suggested retail prices of meats, consumers and producers to comply with the guidance and safety protocol as well as the primary product inspectors. And lastly, for future researchers which can improve and fulfill the inadequacy of this study.